Thank you for joining me. I'm Juan, lead trader and founder of Prosperity Trade. In this video, I have a swing alert for ticker symbol PHAT. They're possibly coming out with some positive news that's going to change the way that we treat GI disorders. This can potentially become a long-term trade, but for now, it's just a swing trade. You're going to want to watch this video. So Phathom Pharmaceutical, they're looking to change the way that we treat a lot of these GI disorders. Currently, we use proton pump inhibitors, and they're trying to go a different route by using potassium competitive acid blockers. Their current drug that they have is Vonoprazan, and it's set to treat H. pylori, GERD, erosive esophagitis, and also for the maintenance of healing of erosive esophagitis and relief to heartburn. Currently, there's a lot of positive sentiment on this drug, especially with their upcoming phase 3 data ready to come out. And PPI, or proton pump inhibitors, have been the standard treatment, especially for the last 30 years. However, there's some concern with their long-term effects, as some of their long-term effects can lead to C. diff, risk of osteoporosis, related fractures of the hip, wrist or spine, vitamin B12 deficiency, hypomagnesium, acute interstitial nephritis. So there's just a lot of concern with the long-term effect. So there's also some studies that proton pump inhibitors can lead to dementia or pneumonia. And this is hypothesized due to the increased level of pH in the gut, and that can lead to growth of other organisms. So the way proton pump inhibitors work, you have the parietal cell, and that's activated by gastrin, histamine, and acetylcholine. And then hydrogen is obtained by combining water with CO2, which makes H2CO3, and the H2CO3 gets dissociated and gets exchanged for chloride. The chloride then passes through the ion channels, and the potassium passes. Then the ATP powers the exchange of hydrogen and potassium, and the hydrogen chloride acid forms acidity. So what the PPI drug does, or the proton pump potassium inhibitor does, it activates when it's in an acidic environment like it is here in the stomach, and the drugs bind to the PPI to prevent the release of protons, reducing the hydrochloric acid in the stomach. This usually takes 2 to 3 days, so it's a little bit long term, and that's the current treatment, the current standard treatment for many of the acidic GI disorders. What potassium's competitive acid blockers do, they bind reversibly to the potassium ions, and they block the sodium potassium adipase enzymes, thus preventing acid production. And this is just a much faster onset, and it's had some positive results. And it's not the first time that this technology came out. It actually started in 1980s, but it was discontinued due to the effects on the liver. So currently, it's approved in 14 countries, and this nets for close to $800 million in sales. They've had 15% year-over-year growth with their drugs out there. They have currently target indication GERD. It's in phase 3. Top line results due October 21st, 2021. So that'll be this month. And this is where the swing trade comes in. But the reason I said it could be potentially a long-term swing, long-term hold, because they've had a lot of positive results with their medication, some of them working much better and quicker than proton pump inhibitors, and others pretty similar. So these are the current standard treatments, proton pump inhibitors, and this is what they've been using for the last close to 30 years. So in 2015, they set their drug out, and they've had positive feedback so far. Now, some of the issues with potassium pump inhibitors, it's a slow onset. Like we said, it can take up to 2 or 3 days, and it's very limited in the way that it's used, and it's short-term life, sometimes just lasting 1 day. And generally, there are people that take this continuously long term, and that's where some of the concern is with some of the side effects. As opposed to PCABs, they have a rapid onset and they have a potent acid control, and it's durable for 24-hour activity. So these are just some of the results of their drugs versus proton pump inhibitors. You see that you've had faster results. So some facts about H. pylori, it affects 115 million people in the US. And they're saying that in general, PPI has a potential $13 billion market cap. GERD affects 65 million people in the US. Large study in the US and in Europe patients that it is consistent with prior Japan studies. So there are quite a bit of articles already. World Journal of GI Pharmacology, numerous journals talking about the potential change of treatment for GERD and different GI disorders, and how this can potentially replace some of the standard treatment that's being done now of just giving proton pump inhibitors and antibiotics. They would still use the antibiotics, but potentially use a potassium competitive acid blocker as opposed to a proton pump inhibitor. So these are just all the results. They can be found on their website. But if you just kind of Google potassium competitive acid blockers, there are a lot of different journals that have reported the results and have discussed and talked about the pros and cons with regard to using a potassium competitive acid blocker. So here they talk about faster and more complete heartburn relief versus proton pump inhibitors. And these are some of the adverse events in clinical development. And it's between 0.1 and 5%. People have had diarrhea, rash, nausea, which is pretty standard, and it's nothing that's too alarming. Now, the biggest concern obviously was the toxic effects on the liver, and that's why it was recalled in the 80s. They've shown that it's not having toxic effects on the liver with this current drug. And these are just some of the studies that they've done with 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, 40 milligrams in the placebo. It's all been positive so far, with the exception of a treatment for a few GI conditions that were pretty similar to proton pump inhibitors. They've pretty much outperformed proton pump inhibitors in most GI disorders. So this is on their website. It can all be found. And this is some of the positive feedback they've gotten from their trials. So this is just one of many journals that talks about potassium competitive acid blockers, a new era for the treatment of acid-related diseases. And it gets into quite a bit of information with regards to some of the studies that have been done, how it's working out in Japan, South Korea, and how they're getting positive results using these drugs out there. So they're about to publish their phase 3 top line data. It's due this month, and that's for their drug medication in the treatment of GERD and erosive esophagitis. So it's going to be some positive news if their data matches the results that they've been getting so far in Japan. And I think it's going to do a lot for this company. And it's a drug that's going to change the way standard treatment has been done for almost 3 decades. They've been treating with the same way. So when you have a drug that's that disruptive, it definitely sparks my interest. And at the same time, it can be high risky, because if that drug does not work out, then the company, the stock will probably dip quite a bit. So it's a pretty high risk. If you're going to swing trade this, you should probably consider hedging your own position by selling a put and buying a put, maybe buying a $35 put and selling a $36 put. Like for January time, this will be a more conservative approach. So the chart right now, it seems like there's some support on 31.20 and some resistance between $36 and $37. So for the swing trade, the target is anything above $36. You should start taking profit, or actually anything above 35.50. There's quite a bit of resistance there, is a potential profit target. And your exit strategy should be anything below 30.50. That should be your risk. So that was the swing trade alert. I think it's a drug that has the potential of disrupting the way that treating GI disorders in the last 30 years. There's a lot of positive news, and I feel very confident that they're going to get positive results come this month. Just keep in mind, FBRX is a company that also had some positive feedback, but they only had one medication in their pipeline, and when they didn't meet endpoints, the stock tanked 80%. The difference between FBRX and this company is that this company, they have so many people that have already written numerous journals that are going over a lot of the positive results and positive outcomes that they've already seen in Japan and Korea and how it's already being used out there. So that's the difference between this drug and FBRX. I'm going to take a position. I feel comfortable taking a small position, but if they receive positive, probably I'll wait for all the hype and everything to slow down, wait for a pullback, and want to take a small position for the long term because there's a large market to be captured. It's a $13 billion industry, and there's not a whole lot of competition in regards to the way these drugs work, the proton pump inhibitors. So if they can change the standard of treatment and be one of the first ones to do this in the United States, then I think there's a lot of potential upside in the future for this company. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, comment, and like, and see you on the next video.